Hi, I'm Jamie Dazzle, the Director of Sustainable Aviation Futures, and today I'm pleased to be interviewing Paul Mcbride, who's the Counsel for the Energy, Project Finance and Infrastructure Practice Groups within Sidley Austin. Sidley Austin, we're a gold sponsor of the recent Sustainable Aviation Futures North America Congress, where we dealt with a whole host of issues, challenges and opportunities related to SAF and aviation decarbonization. And today we're really looking to get some interesting perspectives from Paul in one or two of those areas, and sort of we'll hope to hear a little bit more about what Sidley Austin are doing in this space too. So Paul, welcome.
Thank you.
Paul, could you tell us a little bit about your personal background and work in the environmental and sustainability space, and maybe provide some insight into Sidley Austin and the firm's experience advising on some of the commercial SAF transactions and also project development for SAF technologies?
Absolutely. So to sum up my background, I guess I would probably describe myself as a commodity trading attorney who's focused on environmental projects and, more recently, the energy transition. Historically, most of my work has been focused on supporting the development of renewable projects. So wind, solar, those kinds of energy assets, and that ranged from everything from the offtake, the PPAs on those transactions, to working with the developer on EPC agreements and procurement agreements, sort of across the board to get the project built. I'd say that's probably stayed true the last 4 years that I've been with Sidley. I think the difference that I've had over the last 4 years, though, is that Sidley's got such a really wide scope, and it's across the firm. We represent a variety of industries and a variety of practices across the board, that it's really broadened the practice. So as the energy transition has picked up and accelerated and started to reach out and touch more different industries, I've been getting pulled in sort of outside of my normal practice area to help support those transactions. So now, instead of just focusing solely on the energy group, I'm routinely working with folks that maybe energy is adjacent, but that's not their traditional focus. And I think the work I've done in the SAF arena is a great example. We've got Kevin Lewis and Bart Biggers, who lead our aviation practice group. They've, over the years, done a great job building up a team that is really focused on sort of the leading edge of the aviation space and those transactions that are going on. So as they started seeing an uptick, an increase in interest in sustainable flight, they looked at how can the firm support, and they really reached out across different practice groups to pull in people that they thought might be able to add value. So they've pulled in folks like Heather Palmer, who heads up all of our ESG reporting group, Sandy Knox, who co-founded our emerging companies and venture capital space, just given how many of these companies are starting to get just showing up in this area, whether it's eVTOL or hydrogen or SAF across the board. And as part of that, I was one of the ones that got pulled in. I've got a pretty deep background in commodity trading, and so with fuel being a very significant part of the aviation industry, it made sense. And so I jumped in and started working with them so that we could be in a good position as transactions started to come up. And it didn't take long for that to happen. So we support United and other airlines on a lot of different stuff. United has been a very active participant in the SAF markets, and so that's been one of the earliest areas where I've been able to support. It's everything from, we worked with them to put together the Sustainable Flight Fund that is particularly focused on sustainable flight initiatives. I've supported them on their Eco Skies Alliance program, which really looks at ways to help offset the green premium by bringing their customers into the space to support the purchase of SAF through the transfer of Scope 3 allowances or Scope 3 rights off of the fuel that's being used. And just beyond that, just straight up SAF purchase agreements. We worked with, and I supported United on their 1.5 billion 20-year deal with Alder Fuels, which at the time was the largest publicly announced SAF purchase agreement in aviation history. So it covers a range of stuff, everything from the fuel itself to investments in companies producing the fuel, to how do we bring other players into the space. And I think Sidley's been great in this area, and it's been fun to support them. Well, of course, I'm going to toot our own horn a little bit, but just being one of the earlier leaders in this space, we were actually recognized in 2021 by Financial Times. They identified us as the winner of its North American Innovation on Sustainability and ESG, which was directly in response to our work with the aviation industry and helping the clients reduce GHG emissions.
Yeah, brilliant. I love how you mentioned United there, obviously alongside a lot of other projects. They're doing some wonderful work in the space. I think the other day I saw they had a video done by Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street
Yes.
on the whole SAF production process, and I thought that's fantastic. I sent that to my little nephew to watch as well. But obviously
Yeah,
they're doing so much in the SAF space
yeah,
too.
and I'll admit, I mean, one of the things that's fun from my perspective in most of my practice, if I'm working on a solar farm, you never hear anything about it. The developer and other folks care about it, but nobody else does. So all of it, it's fun to get on a United flight and crack open the Horizons magazine and see, sometimes you'll read the article in there that's talking about something that they're doing. It's like, hey, I played a role in that. I was actually able to contribute to that. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I didn't mention, but we United did the first 100% SAF and one engine passenger flight, shoot, I guess probably about 2 years ago now. And, it was heavily promoted in the Horizons magazine and in other stuff. And it's fun to pull it up when you're getting on a flight for the holidays and see, I contributed to that. It's really sort of exciting.
Absolutely, and I think it's really exciting to see SAF going big time, as it were. We like to say that here within our office, amongst my colleagues as well. I think something you mentioned there as well, which I wanted to sort of pick up on, is you mentioned that you were working on industries that were adjacent to SAF, and it's really interesting to hear you say that, because we are seeing that with our congresses and events. We're seeing people coming into this space from the traditional oil and gas industries, from the renewable energy sector, from the hydrogen space,
Mm-hmm.
people who haven't even been involved in the fuel side at all before, but because I think they just see that there's a huge opportunity there that's sort of posed by the industry. Just moving on to, and I think this works well with sort of the next area that I wanted to sort of discuss with you. And I think what I'd like to ask is if you could sort of maybe paint as a picture of the landscape for SAF in the US at the moment, and maybe just sort of talk a little bit more about the kind of work you're currently doing with clients in the space at this moment. And then the final piece, and apologies, it's a three-part question. What would sort of some piece of advice be that you would give to organizations looking to establish a foothold in the North American SAF market?
Sure. Yeah. I'll try to make sure I hit all three of those parts. I think looking at the first one, and it's going to sound weird, but I was thinking about, how would I paint that picture? And the best image that kind of came to mind, at least at this point in sort of the growth and the development of the industry, is one of those MC Escher sketches. The ones with this sideways staircases, the Penrose steps, the impossible geometries and stuff. And it maybe might seem a little pessimistic to describe it like that, but I think if you step back and think about where we're at right now, it kind of is. You've got folks focused on pathways and researching pathways and commercializing pathways. You've got folks focused on logistical issues. You've got incentive structures. You've got all these different pieces that ultimately have to fit together to get us from one place to a mature SAF market that we're all hoping to reach. But right now, it's not clear which one's going to be the best staircase to take to ultimately get you to your destination. And so I think we all want to reach that objective. It's just a matter of getting some alignment and figuring out how do we go about getting there. And so in that sense, I think probably the biggest area that we need to focus on, and what I've seen in my own practice, is trying to bridge that green premium gap. We all know that it costs more to produce SAF than conventional jet fuel. But the offtakes and just with the fuel being such a large part of the aviation industry's operating expense, they're really not in a position to pay that green premium. So it's trying to figure out how do we bridge that divide. And I think as that sort of becomes more clear, and as we start seeing different opportunities present themselves for sharing or allocating that cost differently, the picture will start to become clearer, and we'll start to see a better outline or a better pathway to the sort of space where all technologies are contributing, all the pathways are contributing to provide the fuel that satisfies the requirements of the aviation industry as a whole, without putting individual airlines out of business, or forcing up prices, or all those other sort of concerns I think a lot of the industry has right now. And so I think that sort of reflects a lot of what I've been working on in my current practice. It goes towards things like the Eco Skies Alliance, and working with airlines to help figure out how do we maximize the value of the fuel that we're purchasing, and how do we start getting other people involved that might have the capacity and the interest in sharing in some of that expense to help us support, so that we can find ways to collaborate to move forward to a sustainable aviation fuel driven future. And I think sort of going into the third part of your question there, I think that's probably the biggest point or the biggest suggestion that I would have as I see the different folks in the market. You've got a lot of people coming in that don't have a lot of experience in SAF, and it can be everything from folks that are have experience in other aspects of the industry, or they've got great engineering, great science backgrounds, researchers that are coming in with these novel and new ways to produce SAF, getting us from just the straight HEFA to the more E-to-J and other kinds of technologies that I think we all sort of recognize we need to get to achieve the outcome. But they're not regular participants in this space. And so I think from that perspective, the best thing that I would probably suggest to them, what I've seen happening, is finding ways to collaborate. Yeah, if you're focused on developing a pathway, then you need to find somebody that's also going to assist when it comes to, how do you market? How do we address the logistics issues? How do we at the same time as we're developing the pathway, support the development of infrastructure or incentive structures that once our technology is commercial, we can actually bring it to market at a price that the industry will bear. So it's really about collaboration. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. And it was great to see the diversity of companies and participants at the Congress just here a couple of weeks ago. And I think that it's great. It's gonna need to continue to grow that way so that we can all sort of move in the same direction and support one another.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. And I think one of the comments we frequently get with our events is just the importance of having every part of the value chain in attendance.
Yeah.
It's no use speaking to a room of fuel producers or a room of airlines. We really need everyone from top to bottom, with the people putting the money behind the projects, the policymakers, and the people such as, Sidley Austin, who can sort of get everything and put it all together as well. So I think collaboration is fantastic. Alongside, of course, I now have staircases analogy in my head as well. But no, that's brilliant, Paul. Thank you very much. And I think, look, the final question really just wanted to tackle today is I think, the American government's done some incredible work in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act and various other things like the SAF Grand Challenge to sort of help to turbocharge the SAF industry, as it were, in North America. Look, in your opinion, what are 2 or 3 levers that could be pulled, or what could be adapted slightly to help to scale up SAF? Because what we're seeing is the significant and huge demand, but it's really currently outstripping supply by huge numbers. What are 2 or 3 levers that could be put in place to help to really scale up the SAF industry in the next 3, 5, 10 years?
So I think from that, it's twofold. One of them, I'd say, would be offtake, and the other would be incentives. I just mentioned, that we need all the different pathways. We need, essentially every drop of SAF that can realistically be produced in order to meet the objectives over the long term. But it's going to take time to get there. And we know that the SAF production isn't going to be at the same price as conventional jet fuel. So to help the airlines and to help the producers, we need to find a way to bridge that divide. We heard it so many times that the individual airlines can't support paying more or substantially more than what they currently pay or what they would pay for Jet A on SAF. It doesn't work with their business models and being such a low margin industry and so competitive. The first person that does that voluntarily, you end up pricing yourself out of the space, and you run into problems. I think we heard that in particular with Kevin's panel with the folks from Cathay Pacific. You're in a market that doesn't have a lot of incentive structure right now or a lot of push. You're hesitant to be the first mover because it would have such dramatic effects. But I think, looking at it from the North American perspective, we've got the motivation, we've got the desire, we have airlines that are stepping up and trying to meet those commitments. But I think what we're maybe lacking a little bit right now is a very clear incentive structure that will support the long-term development. Coming from an infrastructure and project finance background, it's great that we have a tax credits and incentive structures from the IRA. But as was noted, a lot of those expire in 2 years, and it's not clear which ones will be extended, if at all. And to take a project to take a developer that's currently working on commercializing a SAF pathway and getting them to the point where they can start building a pilot project, put it into a commercial scale project that's actually going to be able to supply meaningful volumes, it takes more than 2 years. It takes a lot more than 2 years. And if there's not a line of sight that shows that these incentives are going to be around for long enough to support the continued investment in research and development and construction ultimately of the project, then it's hard to say, it's hard to make those long-term investments that are necessary to get there. So I think on one side, then we need to focus on an incentive structure that gives the market participants confidence and certainty that as they continue to develop, they're not going to find the rug pulled out from under them and be left in a world where those incentives are suddenly gone. On the other side of it, I think from the airline perspective, they need to support with the offtakes, and they need to work with the offtakes ultimately become very important from both sides, but the airlines need to work with the developers and the producers, and the producers need to work with the airlines on the offtake, particularly to figure out how can we maximize the value of the fuel that we actually have. I think those are the opportunities that are out there where, if we can find ways to monetize the scope 3, or focus on how do we share, who has the best ability to really derive value from the incentives that are out there, then that would hopefully allow us to come to a point where the incentives with the creative structures will help bridge that green premium divide and get to a position where the airlines can actually make meaningful commitments and really sign on for a long-term offtake at a price that works for them and at a price that works for the development of the project itself. So that's I think where we're going to see a lot of action going forward, or a lot of movement going forward, and that's kind of what I'm excited about. I like working with folks on structuring, and so any opportunity to get creative is exciting and interesting. But I think sort of coming back to the core of it, it's creativity in the offtakes and really pushing for an incentive structure that works for the long term.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think coming back to you mentioning you've come from renewable energy at the start. I also used to work in the renewable energy space, and I think those long-term power purchase agreements were the key for a lot of projects on the solar and the wind side as well. So it's interesting to see some similar sort of analogies in the SAF space too. And I think we're only really at the beginning of this journey for SAF, even though it's not a new technology. I think we're really seeing this sort of industry take off, and the growth set for the next 10 years is enormous. So it's going to be very exciting to see what comes.
Exactly. And my hope is that it ends up kind of working the same way that the renewable industry is done. The incentives are there to support the development, but over the last 10 years, we've seen the price of renewable energy and solar installations and wind installations come down dramatically. And I think a lot of it is because of the certainty across the market. If we can get that same certainty in the SAF market, the current cost of production, I think it's going to come down. I can't imagine a scenario where it doesn't come down. Just as logistics chains get better refined, as the pathways get improved, everything. My hope is that over time that green premium doesn't become as big a deal, because just the scaling helps shrink it.
Yeah, to be honest, it's exciting to see what the next 12 months holds, let alone the next 3 to 5 years as well in this space.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and thanks for sort of sharing your perspectives and those of Sidley Austin as well. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you once again in Houston next year in October. Hopefully, we'll see you there.
Likewise, sounds great. Thanks.